Hey everyone, Jeff here, and it's another day and another controversial 4K UHD Blu-ray release, this time with Once Upon a Time in the West. Now, the big controversy about this release comes down to the size of the disc that was used and the bit rate. And what happened was, on the 4K format, you can use a 66 gigabyte disc or a 100 gigabyte disc. And for a longer movie like Once Upon a Time in the West, sometimes you would use a 100 gigabyte disc, but we'll talk about that. But basically they used a 66 gig disc, which the bit rate's a little bit lower than you might expect from a movie like this. And there was a lot of controversy about this, like basically being a poor release and not being up to par with even digital platforms like Kaleidoscape. And I want to talk about all of that, give you some context, because I've talked to people in this world. I've talked to people who worked on this disc, give you my thoughts on it, what I think about it. We'll talk about all of the packaging and all the different options. But the bulk of this video is I just want to cover this controversy and let you guys know truly whether or not this one's going to be worth buying for most people. So some quick context, I'd never seen this movie before. And my good friend Dice K. Beppu, when I was hanging out with him in LA a few months ago, and as I've talked to him on podcasts, we were talking about Westerns because he's a big Western fan. I didn't know much about Westerns. I was more horror. And he told me this is a must-see. I almost went to buy the Blu-ray, but then I saw the news about a 4K coming, so I waited. And so this 4K release was the first time I've ever seen the movie. So we have to take that into context. I have seen comparisons of the Blu-ray. I've looked at some screenshots online, which is admittedly not perfect, but I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what that Blu-ray looked like, and obviously a great idea of what the 4K looked like in my own system. And yes, if you look at this disc, yeah, the bit rates are like between 40 to 50 megabits per second. Some of the higher end, like big 4K discs will be 80, 90 megabits per second, and it is a 66 gig disc, so maybe it was a tiny bit more compressed. But the only thing on the disc is the movie. So there's no special features on it or anything. And oftentimes that's where you get a 100 gig disc, is it's the film plus all the features and extra bonuses. So when I watch this, honestly, I think it looks pretty fantastic. Like the HDR grading is excellent. It's got both Dolby Vision and HDR10, and the colors pop. It looks really nice. Is it as sharp as something like Django from Arrow Video, another Western? No, but that's also like a top 5 disc of all time for me. This is really good though in its own context, and comparing it against some of the other big Westerns, it's apples to oranges because we don't know what the source was here, what the negative looked like. But what I will say is there's quite the pedigree behind this release. This was restored from the original camera negative, I'm reading right off the back, by Paramount's archive team, L'Immagine Ritrovata, which my Italian ancestors are rolling in their grave right now, the way I just said that, which is an Italian restoration company. Sergio Leone, they worked on some of his films, and the Film Foundation, which is a huge film preservation restoration company based in the US, but has board members like Guillermo del Toro and Ang Lee, Martin Scorsese, George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Catherine Bigelow. I mean, an insane list of people who are part of the Film Foundation. And this was also personally scrutinized and signed off on by Martin Scorsese. So it's not just Paramount doing this. There's a whole team. There's 3 or 4 different people on this, and you got Scorsese giving it a check mark. And Scorsese's done a ton of restoration work. His World Cinema Project is legendary. He's done so many different restoration, preservation efforts with Criterion and other labels. Like, he gets it. And so he signed off on this and said, this is it. This is great. This is what I want. So first of all, I'm kind of like, who am I to argue with Paramount's archive team, the Italian restoration team, the Film Foundation, and Martin Scorsese himself? Yeah, I'm not. I watch these movies at home on a TV. I am not a restoration expert, a preservation expert. I tell you what I see, and I give you what I see, but these people know better than me. And I accept that. And so if they're saying this is what it is, and we're signing off on this, then I believe this is what it is. I think we're getting lost a little bit in the numbers because bitrate it's not everything. People get lost in bitrate, and I think there's a bit of a placebo effect where if you put this exact same transfer out but told people it was 80 or 90 megabits per second instead of 40 or 50, they'd probably say it was great. But there's a placebo effect of you immediately thinking like, this is not good because the numbers aren't high enough. And I understand that. That's human psychology. But me watching this, like, I had a great time with it. I mean, I think it looks fantastic. It's definitely an improvement over what I could see on the Blu-ray in the screenshots. I guess there's always room for improvement on everything, but it looks fantastic, and it was a great watch in 4K. And so one of the other arguments I've seen is if you go to Kaleidoscape, which is it's a digital platform, but different from like a Vudu. It's essentially, it's like a $5,000 set box that you have to buy, and you can download essentially like full quality files. And that's a lot of times they're equally comparable to the 4K Blu-ray. On Kaleidoscape, this is available, and it's something like 85 or 86 gigabytes. And on the disc here, it's 65 gigabytes. So there's a 20 gig difference. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's obviously just compression. They compressed it for the disc. They went cheap. They went 66 gigs. And talking to people, that's not the case. The case is that a lot of times Kaleidoscape files are actually bigger than the physical media files because it's a different authoring process. So you're comparing, again, apples and oranges. A Kaleidoscape file is bigger because it's authored differently. It's a different process to get it on Kaleidoscape than it is to get it on a disc. So the 66 versus the 88 or whatever it is, and the bit rates being different, like it's all apples and oranges. It's just a different format. It's a different process to get to that point. And so there are nuances and intricacies of authoring a disc versus authoring a digital stream that I don't understand, but I'm going to trust the experts who say this only needed a 66 gigabyte disc because that was the size of the file when they went to author. If it was a tiny bit bigger, they would have put it on a 100 gigabyte disc because realistically, the cost difference, it's minimal, it's negligible. If this needed 100 gigs, they would have put it on 100 gigs, but they finished their file and it didn't need 100 gigs, so they didn't put it on 100 gigs. It's not that they compressed it to get it down to a smaller file size, it's just that's what the file was when they were done. And there's going to be people out there saying, and I get it, you want more, you expect more. I mean, I think we have super high standards in this world, but I'm just happy we have Once Upon a Time in the West on 4K. It's the best it's ever looked and the best it ever will look. At this point, I don't see them going back and doing another restoration. It's very costly. They already had all these people involved. They all signed off on it. They all said this is great. This is preserved. It's on the Film Foundation website. Once Upon a Time in the West is one of their titles. They own it. They say, like, we worked on this. It's great. So I'm good with it, personally. I have no issues. I think it looks really solid. Is there always room for improvement? Of course, but I guess it'll come down to just how big a stickler you are. There isn't really grain reduction here, though. It's not smoothed out. It's not a disaster. There's no DNR. Like, it's a really nice looking image. And so if you have the Blu-ray and you prefer that because you like a super grainy look or whatever, you just like the color grade, whatever it is, like nobody's forcing you to buy this 4K disc. By all means, keep your Blu-ray. But if you want the best that this movie has ever looked, then this 4K disc from Paramount Presents that's going to be it. Okay. This is the best it's ever looked. And I think it's a nice release. Of course, with the packaging and everything, they've got the fold out poster art. They've got the slip cover, special features on here. There's a new commentary by the Spaghetti Western podcast. Leonard Maltin has a look back. There's a ton of legacy features and featurettes from old releases. So it's got everything you'd want, but I think it's solid. And if it was me, like, I have no issue if I was to buy this on 4K, never having seen it before, I'm not going to have an issue. And I feel like that's a lot of people out there, right? A lot of people are going to be seeing this for the first time, maybe hearing about it for the first time on 4K, or at least watching it for the first time on 4K. And if you're not going back, again, I've talked about this in the past about like doing the, okay, let's compare it to this Blu-ray and the DVD release and pick pixels and compare pixels and all this stuff. Like, if you do that, you can drive yourself crazy. You can go on forever and find differences between every single release ever made. And you're just going to be nitpicking to the end of time and not actually enjoy the movies because you can't enjoy the disc. And so if you want to just enjoy the movie, get a great experience, Once Upon a Time in the West here from Paramount Presents is well worth it. That's my 2 cents. That's my review. I hope that helps. I hope it puts a little bit more of a positive spin than what I've been seeing about this release out there. I think it's well worth it, though. If your goal of collecting and watching movies on 4K is to watch movies at the best they've ever been presented, then this is that. So if that's your buying criteria, then you've got it right here. If you guys do want to pick this up, there'll be a link in the description and in the pinned comment. That obviously supports my channel, so I appreciate that. It is a little pricey right now, I will say for sure. Paramount Presents are pricey at launch, but if you do want to wait a little bit, they tend to come down. Totally up to you again and your budget and your love for this movie. If it's not something you necessarily need to have right away, you can wait a little bit. But thank you all for watching, listening. I appreciate the support. Back on the 4K review grind and happy to do it. If you want more like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Of course, follow me on social media. Also, check out my podcast and newsletter, House of 1,000 Movies. If you go to houseof1000movies.com, you'll get access to all of that. It's totally free. Sign up over there, and you'll get exclusive newsletters every Wednesday, plus the podcast episodes, which are on Spotify and right here on YouTube. So thank you all. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy out there, and I'll talk to you soon.